You're dealing with Russia, China, all of the world's most intelligent people, and you're paying your head of cybersecurity for the country £60,000 a year. Like, what sort of message?
It's a joke. The NHS was great. Now it's just a complete shithole.
What are you trying to achieve with Think?
The way that I see how people view things generally is very much surface level, whereas markets, you have to operate on the second order, third order.
What is your ambition for the UK?
There's the one that I mentioned with regards to Georgism. Let's extract capital, aka debt, that's locked in the land to increase affordability of housing.
If you had a magic wand and you could change something about the UK, what would it be? What are you trying to achieve with Think?
So what we're trying to achieve is really the way that I see how people view things generally is very much surface level. Whereas markets, you have to operate on the second order, third order. Okay, so let's take a perfect example in politics right now. Scrapping VAT on private schools. Okay. What is the goal here? Is it to raise tax revenue, or is it to stick one to rich people? Because the way that I see it is that if it's to stick one to richer people and to stop elitism, increase in VAT is actually going to make it more elite.
Yeah.
Because what's going to happen is that the poorest rich people can no longer afford it, and so they then have to go down to the state school or maybe grammar schools. Fine. But then what happens then to taxation? That's going to have to increase to make up for the added demand.
Mm-hmm.
What are teachers then going to say? Oh, there's all this added demand that we didn't have before. We now need to be paid more. What happens then to wage growth in the public sector? Has to go up. What happens to inflation perhaps? That then has to go up. So there's all of these unintended consequences that they're not thinking about purely because their term is 4 years. That's all they care about. And so I think having people understand the link between decisions made at the top level that sound good, but their actual effects is another one. I just wrote about this last week as well in terms of unintended consequences. Actually, the newsletter is going to be released on Friday, so I've written it already, but it's out on Friday. And basically, it's in the US, the food stamps program means that $12 billion is handed to Coca-Cola every single year. The food stamps program is $120 billion. So that's 10% of the program that goes to Coca-Cola. Now, why is that? Well, it's because the recipients spend $12 billion on sugary soft drinks every single year. So it's effectively a subsidy to Coca-Cola. As a trader, I look at that as saying, buy Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
Because the government's effectively putting a support in for Coca-Cola. Whereas the everyday person might look at that as being, that's really, really bad.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're an investor, you have to look at things for how they really are. You have to take the morals out of things. And so, again, unintended consequences can be beneficial as a trader or an investor, but on the outset, for the everyday person, might look different. Now, that's not to say that I think poor people shouldn't have sugary drinks. I don't care. Everyone can have a can of Coke or a few. But you have to look at things as being, okay, as an investor / trader, where is the opportunity? And so that's what I'm trying to get people to understand.
And that's, I actually think that being an investor gives you a massive advantage, or at least understanding macro, understanding how it trickles down gives you a massive advantage in looking at everything in life.
Exactly.
Like when the pandemic hit, for example, our clients who come to us for advice, they were like, what does this pandemic mean for us? And then we had to become like epidemiologists almost overnight, like going through material, like working with our analysts and stuff like that to really understand like what the death rates were, you know, how big this could be, how much it could impact on trade routes, and if the global lockdowns happen, all this sort of stuff. And you have to start thinking way bigger, and then like, okay, what is this? You're getting way more educated. And I would just think that you've just got a massive leg up in life if you're thinking about all of these, because you just look at life from a completely different perspective. Yeah,
no, I completely agree. And then the funny thing that I've noticed with post-great financial crisis economics, though, is all of these things just lead to an uptick in volatility. But the volatility suppression comes from monetary policy. And that volatility suppression happens so fast. We even saw it in August just recently, you know, at the start of August, with basically volatility just blowing up. But rather than it remaining sticky and higher and leading to the S&P 500 really coming down and sort of stagnating at a lower level, they just sold it off because they just didn't care. They just knew that the Fed was probably going to come in and cut in the September. That's really where they price things in. So monetary policy has really caused a concentration on a focus of, okay, what is this interest rate going to do at the next meeting? I love it. I absolutely love it. It makes life so much easier.
So much easier.
So much easier.
Just buy the S&P.
Just buy it. Honestly, I'm releasing a lead magnet for Think, right? And we're going to throw ads behind it. And it's going to be a 20-minute rant of me just saying all of the reasons as to why you should just buy the S&P 500, which kind of goes against thinking as, trying to get people to subscribe to a stock picking service.
Yeah.
Because then it's like, well, why would I want to go and pick stocks if all you're saying is to buy the S&P 500? But the outcome of that will be, all right, have 60% of your portfolio in the S&P 500. Now let's juice the rest. And so, yeah, monetary policy is one of the most beautiful things that I've ever encountered in the last 15 or so years.
But do you also think that it's a massive reason for wealth dispersion across the globe?
So we can get into a really nice economic argument here. And my economic view is that land values are the issue with inequality. The issue with inequality isn't capital or income. Okay. I think capital and income are a fantastic earned resource. When we are looking at land, because no one made the land, because it's fixed in supply, it's got an inelastic supply curve. So if you shift money supply out, what's going to happen is that land price just increases. You can build more houses, but the land supply doesn't change. The housing supply changes. But the issue is that the bricks and the house, when it's built, is just a massive function of the land that it's sitting on.
Yeah.
So yes, you can increase planning or liberalize planning. That's not going to change the fact that you can't make more land unless you do a Dubai style, sand palms. No one's going to do that. It's too expensive. And I think it's been a flop in Dubai as well. And so until we are able to tax land values and untax capital and income, I think we're always going to have a massive issue with inequality, because capital and income isn't the issue here. And this is why our politicians, I feel, are so short-sighted, because what they're not getting is that really to unlock investment, they need to unlock mortgage debt that's just in the ground, that's just leading to basically house prices and commercial property prices increasing, which then leads to the boom and bust. How did 2008 happen?
Yeah, property crisis.
Exactly. Whereas what we want to do is have people taking home more of their earned money. And even it benefits the rich as well, because effectively they can keep more from their dividends rather than just throwing everything into the housing market and having this real illiquidity. We just need to make things more liquid, but there's too much debt that's illiquid.
And the number of my clients as well that are now in their 70s and 80s, and they're basically sitting on £1 million in their property, and they're withdrawing money from their pensions. And they're like, is this going to last me until I die? And you're like, most of your wealth at the moment is locked up in the place where you sleep.
Yeah.
And that is actually quite mental when you think about it.
Yeah.
But I talk about this quite a lot. Like, why do we tax income and not land or assets? It's the number one biggest frustration, but nobody, as you say, politicians are short-term thinkers. So no one wants to make any radical changes, particularly like, let's say the NHS, for example, or any of these longer-term structural issues where if they commit to making a change, maybe over the next 20 years, they're probably going to lose the next election, so they would never do it.
Exactly. And also there's too much sort of job security that is tied up in property advisory, real estate management, estate agency, law, accountancy. There's so much that if you were to change things in that way, there would probably be a massive loss of jobs. But at the end of the day, what matters more? Is it the fact that we really actually want to unlock a lot of investment, or do we just want this kind of merry-go-round of bullshit, quite frankly? And I just wish that they would have the balls basically to grasp this concept. What I find is that there's too much giving in and too much passivity. I don't even know if that's a word. I like to use it amongst a lot of the British culture. I tend to find, whether it's politics, whether it's people playing their phones and stuff out loud on public transport. No one ever says, can you shut up, please? The amount of times I have to tell people, do you have headphones, is insane.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And it's just like, it's just these minor things that snowball, and it just becomes way too permissive, and people just get on with things and just have a moan, and then nothing's done, and it's just nonsense.
Yeah, the podcast is called Ambitious Minds, and my intention is to try to, I actually think that the UK just massively lacks ambition. So my intention is to try to inspire as many people as possible by giving stories from like the everyday entrepreneur or people that are doing well in their careers, because I think that in the UK we suffer from this, people call it tall poppy syndrome, but the moment you start to do well and people try to be negative or cut you down, and that's the wrong way to look at it. And we had this conversation on the way into the room, but about America, for example, and people are more willing to help you out, people are more supportive, and I think that the UK just fundamentally lacks a lot of ambition. And exactly as you say, if there's people playing music loud on public transport, that's fucking annoying, but no one wants to put an end to that.
No.
And I think that that's probably where we almost need to take a bit more control of everything at the moment.
There's also this strange thing that I've noticed recently, and it's, if someone does something bad, there's more sort of empathy and sympathy for the person that does something bad. Take Hugh Edwards, for example, than there is for the victims. I've never known anything like it.
Yeah.
It's like these judges, and I think this is the same actually. Someone else from America mentioned this, and it's going on in America too. So I don't think it's just a UK thing. I think it's a state of the times thing perhaps, but people are more concerned about the person's upbringing in life as to how they got to the place of doing a bad thing than they are for the victim. And it just leads to this absolutely mind-numbing outcome of just absolutely getting nowhere in terms of things like crime and actually changing things. I don't understand it.
Yeah. If you had a magic wand and you could change something about the UK, what would it be?
I would firstly look at a Georgist style economy. Absolutely. There's certain ways to do it, and to do it in stages, I guess. But if we want to model ourselves, we should have, after Brexit, modelled it on Singapore. Singapore, for example, has 80% social housing, which is fantastic. And it's not like shithole houses. Like, they have lovely houses, 20% private. Singapore, at the end of the day, is one of the richest countries in the world. You've got some of the wealthiest people that live there in finance, in loads of different stuff. So we're not talking about some dumpster here. You've got politicians that are paid well that can't take second jobs. Okay. There's a guy just yesterday who was an ex-Singaporean minister who's just been sent to jail, or at least sentenced for bribery, of which, if the UK politicians that we're hearing about at the moment had done the same, they would all be in jail if we had the Singaporean laws. Just bear that in mind. It's not a donation, it's bribery in Singapore's eyes. They've got government debt to GDP of 174%. So while Rachel Reeves is crying about it being at 100%, of which a fair amount is owned by the BOE, which effectively, when it matures, will be rolled off and cancelled, they're off, making sure that the economy is actually growing. Because at the end of the day, it's a funny number. It doesn't necessarily matter. If you want to compare other countries, the Swiss National Bank has government debt to GDP of over 230%. Japan, bit fucked, over 260%. So when they're talking about 100%, you have to be like, okay, please stop. Just focus on the actual proper denominator of growth rather than, closing your deficit down. It's silly. And so I think, Singapore also has land value tax as well, by the way.
Oh, does it? Okay.
Yeah. So when we're looking at an economy to model ourselves on, it should really be like Singapore. You've also got how punitive they are in terms of crime. Drugs, 10 years for even a tiny bit of weed. I think they banned the import of vapes.
Wow, did they?
Yeah. So you can buy vapes there, but you can't import them. So everything is very tightly I wouldn't say controlled, but they know exactly what they want and how they want their economy to function. And it's interesting because I think his name is Lee Kuan Wong or something like that. I can't remember. But he was basically the guy who founded what is modern day Singapore.
I've read about this recently, yeah.
And Tony Blair actually met with him, and Tony Blair modelled or Tony Blair agreed with a lot of what he said.
Yeah.
But he didn't implement any of it. He didn't implement a thing, which is bizarre because Tony Blair considers him as one of his inspirations.
How does that happen?
I don't know. I don't know. What's also interesting is that Tony Blair's kids went to my school, and Ewan is now off doing some funny ecology/liberal thing, which is clearly in direct conflict with his dad. So, which fair play to him, you know. I think it's like a fund or something like that.
Yeah.
Which, again, whatever. But I don't know how you can.
Is it because UK politicians are not paid to take risks?
Well, this is the other thing, sorry, that I haven't mentioned. So with Singaporean politicians, they're paid in 3 different ways. So they're paid their base salary, which I think is like minimum $250,000 a year. But then they're also paid according to economic metrics on the local and also national level.
Okay.
So if they do well in their constituency, they're paid a bonus. If they do well as a collective in terms of GDP growth, they're also paid an additional bonus. Whereas here, apparently to survive, you have to have a lord basically finance your wife's wardrobe. It's terrible, really. But to be fair, the Prime Minister being paid 165 grand and then the Chief of Staff being paid more is a joke. It's a complete and utter joke, quite frankly. What is the incentive to do a good job or even care about anything?
Yeah.
There's people where my mum works in Lambeth Council that are probably paid more. It doesn't make any sense. The Prime Minister should be on £1 million a year, right?
It's the most important job in the country.
The most important job. There's traders that I know that sit in their fucking underpants at home that make more than that. I make more than that. I make more than the Prime Minister, for fuck's sake. How does that work?
Yeah.
I'm a twat that says a lot on Twitter. Like, how is this? Are we stupid? How do we expect the Prime Minister to want to do anything, or any of these MPs, quite frankly? You know, it's insane.
Yeah.
And then people are wondering why they're taking donations and stuff. My issue isn't with the donations. My issue is with the Labour Party shouting for 14 years about the other side taking donations. It's the hypocrisy.
It's the whole Spider-Man meme when they're just pointing at each other.
Like, I don't blame them because they're paid such shit for an important job. But then don't come for 14 years and you know, say that it's wrong.
Yeah.
Which is what they were doing.
The state of politics at the moment in the UK is pretty shit, and same in America as well, to be honest with you. But I don't really understand how. Actually, you may have seen this, but did you see the UK recently published an advert for the head of cybersecurity in the UK, and like the salary was something like £60,000. I mean, like, you're dealing with Russia, China, like all of the world's most intelligent people, and you're paying your head of cybersecurity for the country, for the government, £60,000 a year. Like, what sort of message does that send? Who are you getting to apply for that position?
It's a joke. And the thing is that we can probably get onto the NHS. Look, the NHS was great until about, I think, 2006-ish, 2007. Now it's just a complete shithole. But the thing is that so much money's been put into it. No matter what people say, you can say, oh yeah, there's been no real terms cut in the NHS. It's always been above inflation increases in the NHS budget year on year since 2010. So when you walk into an NHS hospital, why is it that when you go to a front desk, it's empty? Why is it that half the hospital is a ghost town? Where is the money? Why does it look like not a wall's been painted in 20 years? Where is the money? So you can complain that it's underfunded, but we've got to see something for it.
It might be underfunded, but if you look at the absolute amount of money that is spent on the NHS, it is fucking ridiculous.
It's like, what? Like, I don't even know how much is it? 120 billion a year or something like that? Is it more?
I don't know. What I do know is that the NHS is the world's 7th largest employer. How the fuck
Like,
is that the case?
It makes no sense. And it's like, oh, I just look at it for what it is. And I broke my toe a couple of months ago, actually. I'm not able to actually move it, but it was broken, went for an x-ray. They said, yeah, sorry, there's nothing we can do. 3 months later, I still can't move it. And so I went to the GP and I was like, well, I can't move my toe. I'm diabetic. Like, it's pretty serious. And they referred me to an app. The app didn't work. And then I had to download another app. 25 minutes later, speaking to an AI chatbot through every single... Oh, yeah, sorry. They didn't actually have a section for the foot there. It was leg and back. So I had to go through leg and back. And then 25 minutes later, there was no... There was no real outcome to it, and I just closed the app. So I'm just stuck with a broken toe because of a stupid app.
Yeah.
It's like, is this what our money's been spent on?
Yeah. I get private healthcare through work, and before I can get referred to a private consultant, I have to go to the NHS. I'm like, this is completely pointless. This is being paid for. Why can't I just go directly to a private consultant, take strain off the NHS? I don't need an appointment with a GP from the NHS at all.
But it's like, whenever you try and say there's an alternative method, so if you look at socialised health insurance, the idiots only hear health insurance. So then they instantly think US. Everybody's mind who says that they hate the US is completely dominated by the US and their thought, whether it's liberal thought in terms of sort of deconstructionism, you know, anything to do with gender, race, you know, politics. It's dominated by US thought. You know, we can take something like Black Lives Matter. That has been imported, and there are 100% issues to do with race in the UK. But the whole concept of Black Lives Matter as an institution has been imported from US thinking. It's got nothing to do with the UK. And so we just constantly see how the obsession with the US is seeping into the UK, and it doesn't make sense because we aren't the US. We have literally nothing.
I wish we were more like the US.
I wish we were more like the US. The US has loads of bad stuff going on. However, I think generally it's better these days to be in the US than it is to be in the UK.
Yeah. Would you consider leaving the UK right now?
Yes, we're planning to.
Are you?
Yeah, we're getting our Irish passports. I'm 3/4 Irish. Mrs. Grandad was Irish as well.
Okay.
And so my little one can get her Irish passport through my mum.
Yeah. Where would you go?
Portugal.
Really?
Yeah, my cousin moved from LA, funny enough, to Portugal. He's a big surfer, so down in that area, I think it's Nazare.
Yeah,
Nazare.
Yeah, Nazare, what it's called. Yeah, that's where the huge wave is. World's largest.
So he's moved to Nearish there.
Okay.
He was he is a musician, so he goes on tour. So it's quite a nice sort of central base to the UK, to America, whatever. And so he's there. He's got a little one that's 5. Mine's 4. So if we're looking to move anywhere, it makes sense to go there. But the other thing as well is, I guess, lifestyle cost. Our lifestyle here is quite high cost, I would say. It's above average. And so what I want to do is just reduce that, keep more money in the business, and be able to, you know, grow it to exponential levels rather than stay in London where everything feels like a drag. And yeah, reduce that. I think they've got quite a nice tax regime as well.
They do. Very attractive tax regime.
Foreign income.
Yeah.
So I think they've reintroduced it. They stopped it in January of this year.
Yeah.
But then they're about to pass it again, the NHR. So you can get 0% tax on foreign income, which is fantastic.
I know a lot of people now. How old are you?
31.
Okay, yeah, similar age. I'm 33. So a lot of our friends will be the same age. But now priorities are changing.
Yeah.
The mindset in your 20s was a lot different to the mindset in your 30s.
Yeah.
You've got a family, so it's even dramatically different. What was your mindset like in your 20s, in fact?
Oh, mate. I had to give up drinking about 3-4 years ago because I was just like, I'm not 20 anymore. But yeah, it was hectic. Let's put it that way. It was going out a lot, 2-day benders, clients, that kind of thing. Like, it wasn't nice. When I look back on it, I probably really, really fucked myself up, to be honest with you. But I think a lot of people have done that. The drinking culture here is insane. And the thing with the drinking culture here is it doesn't just extend or stay at alcohol. You know, a lot of people do cocaine.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is also something that's seeped in quite a lot. The price of cocaine is so cheap now. Not that I know, I've seen reports.
That FT graph which shows the quality versus the price.
Yeah. I think there's certain things that I can say about that as to why. I'm not saying anything about Albanians coming to the UK or anything like that, but it is because there's a lot more Albanians in the UK, and that's a fact. It's a fact. And I think, 20s, very, very hectic. It's good to go through those stages though, but you have to grow out of them at some point. Me stopping drinking was probably the best thing that I've ever done, because now I know that my tiredness is through actual effort of doing something. Whereas when I was reaching the end of my drinking career, if you like, my tiredness was because I was hungover. Yeah. And the hangovers would last 2 days, 3 days.
100%, yeah.
The real kicker was the anxiety though.
Anxiety.
Oh, mate, it was awful at the end. Like the panic attacks, everything.
Really?
Yeah, really bad. And it got to the stage where I was like having a panic attack. This was over the pandemic. I was having like a panic attack every 2-3 weeks from alcohol. And I was just like, nah, can't do this anymore. So I completely reversed basically my life. I did a test for testosterone as well, because after I stopped drinking, I noticed that I was just so sluggish, tired, and it was basically the lowest that it could be on the scale.
Wow.
Yeah, so I'd recommend every man to get that tested.
You're in pretty good shape now.
Yeah, I think I'm probably a little bit bigger than I should be, but
has that helped it as well?
What's that?
Has the testosterone, increased levels of testosterone, helped you to get bigger and
it honestly changes everything.
Right.
It changes your mindset. It changes how you think about certain situations and things. It changes your desires, but for the better. Like, for example, my priorities are my daughter, my missus, and the business, whereas before it would be, I want to go out, get smashed, don't really care, that kind of thing. It just, honestly, like, it's really, really a massive, massive change. But the biggest thing that I did notice was the focus element. Like, you're just able to focus on something so well. And people always say, oh yeah, you're on testosterone, do you get roid rage? It's not a steroid, it's literally a natural hormone. But the interesting thing about it is you get the rage, if you like, or the irritability when your estrogen's high.
Okay.
So I basically know what it feels like to be a woman on a period. It's not nice when it goes up uncontrolled. It's really not nice. So I have a lot of sympathy for women when they're going through that increased hormone stage. So yeah. But listen, I would suggest that every man over the age of 30 to get it tested.
Really?
Oh, 100%.
Where can you get it tested? Do you know?
You can buy a test on Amazon. So the usual process is you get a finger prick test to validate if it's worth getting a full blood panel.
Got you.
That initial finger prick test will tell you basically if it's worth it. If it's on the low end, 100% go forward.
Do you have to send that off, or does it tell you almost immediately?
You have to send it off, yes. You have to fill up like a tiny little vial, like that big. And then you get sent the kit to then go and do it in like Superdrug or wherever. And yeah, but I think, look, if you're at the gym, anyway, it increases your desire to go to the gym as well massively. But if you're at the gym, and let's say before you could lift, I don't know, 100 kg on bench press, probably within 6 to 8 weeks, you're doing 130, 140.
30 to 40% increase.
Yeah.
In 6 weeks.
Yeah.
It's unheard of.
Literally, like, it's just ridiculous.
Unless you're first starting out.
Because the thing is that it increases your recovery as well.
Okay.
So like everything's just better, basically. There are a couple of things to watch out for. So like with anything, there's always trade-offs. So it will shut down your natural testosterone if you don't take something else of it called HCG.
Okay.
And you do have to watch your blood panels for things like increased lipids, whether your estrogen is high, if your prolactin's higher. Probably better to get your prostate checked a little bit more often once you get to like 40-ish. But other than that, as long as you're like sensible with it, and you're not taking bodybuilder doses, which is like a gram of the stuff a week, you're probably going to be fine. And also, it's a fantastic contraceptive as well.
Is it really?
Yeah. And so when women are talking about like how much they hate the pill and how much issues the pill causes,
Yeah.
you know, because it really does cause women a lot of issues. There's one that I've heard of that when women are on the pill and they find they find their partner attractive, but when they come off of it changes and they hate them.
Yeah. your desires when you're on the pill versus off the pill are different.
Yeah.
That's mental.
Yeah. And so I feel like, look, the upside of being on testosterone is you naturally get bigger, which everyone wants. If you don't, then you're a weirdo. You lose body fat because you've got more muscle mass, so you're burning off more calories if you eat the same. And you just feel better. How's
it a natural contraception?
Because it shuts down your sperm production. You can get it back, but it just closes down your sperm production.
So if you want to go on to, if you're in a happy relationship, your girlfriend doesn't want to be on birth control, take testosterone, and then
everything gets better.
She's going to like you more. Your life's going to be better.
Yeah.
And then when you cycle off, I'm guessing then, of testosterone when you want to have kids.
Yeah, or you can just take HCG and that just keeps your sperm there. So
interesting.
There's like,
I've heard a lot about testosterone essentially being a bit of an epidemic, really, particularly in, drinking culture is a massive contributor towards it, from what I understand. And obviously for older men as well, as their testosterone production starts to slow. We just sit there and say, oh yeah, men become more irritable and, more frustrated as they get older, and how much of that is linked to a drop off in their testosterone. We just go, grumpy old man or whatever, but how much of it can be the RFK, or it's the Robert Kennedy Jr.
Yeah.
He's 17? He's an absolute machine.
No, he can climb bench presses like 90 kg, which is all right for a 70-year-old. But I think it's been really maligned for some reason. I don't really understand why. It's like I spoke to the GP initially, and I was like, are you able to include a blood test for, male hormones, testosterone, and see whether everything's in check? And she's like, oh, I don't know. I don't really know anything about it. And it's like, why? You're a doctor. It's like a key male hormone. Why do you not know anything about this? And it doesn't make any sense. And also, when you go through the NHS to get it prescribed, they give you a shot every 2 weeks, which is really, really bad, because basically it makes your production go like that and then a massive drop. And then it goes like that and a massive drop, whereas really what you want is like that. And so they don't really know anything about it. Again, it doesn't make any sense why it's a key male hormone. And probably the deficiency of it is causing a lot of issues, I guess, socially as well. Early death for men, it's a very, very strong predictor if you've got low T.
Wow.
And look, I'm not saying take what I'm on at the moment, for example, which is 300 milligrams a week. The TRT dose is normally 100 to 150. It completely depends. I am using it for performance enhancement at the gym. But I think it's very, very key to understand a core component of male biology. And to get it tested, it costs like 30 quid to get a test.
Fuck.
Yeah, it's nothing.
Yeah, so it's worth anyone listening, any male listening, just to go and explore it if you do think that you've got low test, or maybe even if you don't suspect it.
Yeah, so the symptoms of it are if your libido's down, anxiety, really, really tired, but not in normal ways of tiredness. Like, let's say you get up and do a task and then literally you feel knackered. Irritability's another one, and lack of focus as well is a really difficult one. Sort of that mind fog. Those key things are the ones. And I'm not saying this from you see people online talking about low T and all of this as a joke. I'm saying genuinely get it checked, because even a small dose can make things better.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Do you think that's also, you said earlier on about not drinking has helped you to focus. It sounds like this has helped you to focus. Have those contributed to a much, actually let me go back and ask this question again. Do you think that not drinking and, do you think that drinking and having low testosterone was causing you to be demotivated at things like work? Would you reckon your business would be in the position it is now if you hadn't done those things?
So there's a couple of things there. So with regards to alcohol is a sly demon in my view, because the way that alcohol works is it tricks you massively. Once you get out of that hangover, you think you're all right again. So say you're drinking on the Saturday, you get to the Tuesday, Wednesday, that's when you start feeling much, much better. Thirsty Thursday comes, and there's a reason why people go out on a Thursday. It's because they're feeling better now from that weekend blitz that they do. And the alcohol is telling you secretly in your mind, get back on it, get back on it. So I think that is one component of the cycle of alcohol. I used to love drinking. I absolutely loved it. But then I read one book, and it's Alan Carr's Easy Way. And look, I don't know how this guy does it, whether he's hypnotized me through reading it or whatever. I don't believe in any of that kind of stuff. But I read this one book once, and then I've never drunk alcohol ever again. And it's well known that this literally changes everyone when they want to stop drinking. I think it's got something like a 90% success rate.
Whoa.
Because it's so bizarre. I'm telling you, it's so weird. I don't understand. It's almost like it deprograms you into realizing what alcohol really is. Like, it makes you feel like you're stupid for wanting to drink alcohol, if that makes sense, because it explains to you how your brain processes it. It explains to you what you're actually seeing when you see an alcohol advert. I saw an advert the other day, and it makes perfect sense now that I'm not a drinker, of Jack Daniels. And it was showing Jack Daniels to be like this glorified thing, like a bottle of Jack Daniels. And I was thinking to myself, I've never seen anyone holding a bottle of Jack Daniels I've ever thought, are you all right? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just a weird one. And then I was thinking all of the times where I'd spent 500 quid on a bottle of vodka or Belvedere or Grey Goose, and I'm like, what a twat.
Yeah.
Like, for some liquid that makes you feel shit the next day. It's bizarre. But yeah, 100% in terms of more motivation, stopping drinking. It's just reducing the barrier. In terms of business, we've had a very, very turbulent couple of years because... Sorry, I got a bad cold. Because we were basically defrauded over a series of 3-4 years. A guy approached me who we were chatting on Twitter for ages. And in 2020, June, he said to me, I want to invest in your business. I'm selling my business to a big casino, which was bullshit. I want to reach out into finance and everything. The investment was going to be 1.2 million. Over the next series of years, everything was explained almost every day as to what stage this was at. And I'll give you an example. So the Gambling Commission in Nevada had to pass a certain law, for example, to be able to have this deal come off. And so there was a big delay. They had to develop some component of the app, which all made sense. So there was a really, really big delay again. And all of this time we were like basically surviving because we weren't growing the business because we didn't want to pivot into...
Waiting for that money to come
Exactly.
through.
We didn't want to pivot into a certain strategy, which we then have to change straight away. And so, yeah, we were at that stage. And then in November of last year, he said, oh, yeah, everything's done. I'm getting my bank accounts open now for it. All of this. Coots was going to be the bank. And then it came to the stage throughout, when was it? December through to March, where everything was an issue. Oh, there was the code to, access the bank account. It's not been sent. This guy was lived in Manchester. In the December, Manchester's first tornado happened. The first ever tornado that could be in Manchester occurred. And before this, he was saying, oh, yeah, the weather, all of this, Royal Mail delayed. He had the luck. A tornado appeared in Manchester for the first time ever. In the January, he said, oh, yeah, the money's in now, but they're still doing loads of checks. He had me thinking it was under a suspicious activity report because there was just every single delay. There were fake bank statements, fake email threads from law firms, from Coots, from the casino, Caesars. He'd faked all of this. So this whole time, he had me on the line thinking that this was happening. And what are you to doubt when everything makes sense? And there's actual evidence to back it up. There was transfer. He'd faked a transfer on a mobile app. What am I meant to believe? And so this happened for 4 years that he'd had us on the line for. And we've been waiting every single moment. And it might sound to people like that's crazy, but if you consider 2020, 2021 was basically a write-off where one, pandemic, and we'd had a baby. Well, 1 and 2, that's it. And then 2022 to 2024 was basically coming out of that pandemic and sort of recalibrating. The thing, and sorry, to wrap it up, in June, he said that his gambling license, because the firm was to do with gambling, he said that his gambling license was being taken away because he hadn't paid the right fee or something. So I'd ended up sending him 10 grand because I trusted him and I didn't want this deal to go away, right?
So we've gone here from you're looking for investment. Were you even looking for investment initially, or did he approach you?
No, he approached me. And I actually said no initially. He approached me in 2019, at the end of 2019. I said no. He reapproached me in 2020 June, so 6 months later. And this is all, I've done a long video on this, 10 minutes. I'll send it to you after because this only tells like a 0.1% of the story. And it's probably the best 10 grand that I've spent because I could still be sitting here today thinking that this was happening. He's such a good liar and such a narcissist and such a sociopath. He's very, very dangerous. I then find out that he's done this to 8 other people.
He's a fraudster?
Yeah. I've met the guy 4 or 5 times in person. He was like, all I want is for your family to do well out of this and all of this stuff. And literally we spoke every single day. I was vomiting one time. Back in June, I had a stomach bug. And because I was out of it for like 4 hours, I come back to my phone and he's like, David, where are you? I thought you died. Like saying stuff like this, like as if he's almost feeding off of the fact that I'm on the line, if that makes sense. And so, yeah, 5 weeks after sending that money and him not paying back, I was like, this is all bollocks, isn't it? Ended up speaking with his past co-founder. He said that he hadn't been part of the company for 2-3 years.
Right.
Ended up speaking with other people. I'd found out that the money that I'd given him was actually to pay someone else off.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah. So the lengths and the moral of this story really, and I think at the start of the pod I said, if there's a learning experience that can come from anything, is set deadlines. And if something starts to not smell right, just get out of it because there'll be another opportunity.
And that's the thing, you spent this 4 years essentially not necessarily passing up opportunities, but not looking for opportunities for investment. At
one point, I was suicidal over it. Because if you can imagine, well, there were a couple of points actually that I was suicidal over it. To the point, and only my missus knows this, but I'd actually written a fucking suicide note.
No way.
Yeah, it was that bad. Because I just couldn't see an end to any of this happening. And I was like, if this doesn't happen, where am I left?
Yeah.
And it was that bad. And I feel like rather than it actually be a real thing, I think I was doing it to more see how it felt, if that makes sense. It's really, really bizarre one because I didn't feel depressed or anything like that. It was weird, but the situation was awful. Home life, it's not that me and my missus were at each other's throats. It's just there was a constant tension over this one thing every day. This one fucker had such control over how we felt during that day. If there was a piece of good news, we felt elated for a couple of hours. Then
that bogs you down afterwards.
Yeah, and then when nothing happened, boom, straight into just sitting there on the sofa in silence.
Fuck.
But imagine that for a year and a half, every single day. He ruined the first couple of years of my daughter's life. And the worst thing about it, and why I come out against, crime, police, things like that, is because the police don't want anything to do with it.
No.
And the other thing that I know is that these people who are actual narcissists, malignant narcissists like this, they don't see the world in the same way that you and I would see it. They see the world in how can I extract, how can I manipulate this person for their own enjoyment. Like we wouldn't, because throughout this, even my dad said, he's not mental, is he? Because it was going on for so long. And I was like, no, what reason would he be doing this for? Like, why would he want me on his case every day for 3 years? And it's because he's insane. He's got a personality disorder. And I'd never ever come across anyone like that. In finance, you meet, relatively mental people, but not to, and I think it's because they might be in a controlled extent. So you don't know what happens, at home, for example. But I'd never met anyone, now looking back on it, who genuinely is a danger to the world. And I don't mean that in any kind of simple terms. I genuinely think he's a massive danger, because he's going to go to other lengths later down the line. He pretended to me that his dad died. He said to me when I was asking for my money back, he said to me, "Oh, I can't do this right now because I'm about to give my dad his end of life morphine."
What?
Yeah, honestly, insane. Insane.
And in reality, the police, like, given the evidence, should just, one, you arrest him for the fraud, but two, to take him away, or at least go for a process to be like, is this person sane? Should he be on the streets, etc.? Because what is he going to do? And you said earlier on about he used your money to pay somebody else. There is now an element as well that if you're trying to get your money back from him, he might do this to somebody else to pay you.
Exactly.
When does this stop with someone like that?
Yeah.
I've had people on this podcast who have gone out there and raised money, and it's like through angel investors and that sort of thing. But what would you do differently? Like, you've been through a proper tough time, but let's say you're starting today and you're going to go through this whole process again. What would you do differently?
I would have very, very strict deadlines on when I want things to be met. I think in terms of this small size raise where it's under, if you're looking for, say, 100 grand, for example, I would say, look, we need to complete this within 30 days. Do you agree? Can we get something signed within the next 7 days? If that 7 days passes, move on.
Yeah.
Because they're obviously not serious. It's like in trading, right? Markets can either go up or down. At the end of the day, with small tickets, it's either a yes or a no. You're taking a massive, massive punt, because people would only be raising small tickets if it were a massive, massive punt. And so if the investor doesn't necessarily understand that, then it's not worth pursuing, because they're going to be on your case for every tiny little thing. It's like when I was broken, having someone with a 10 grand account versus a 500 grand account, it was a much bigger pain dealing with a 10 grand account person, because they clearly didn't have as much liquidity.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were more concerned about the everyday gyrations of the market. I think as well, looking back, I wouldn't trust anyone from South East London. I'm joking. I would certainly have a vetting process as to, have they done this before?
Yeah.
Honestly, the difficulty is now, though, is that since I've seen the lengths to what people will go through to fake things, honestly, it's got to be a full DD, 100%, because I've seen some stuff now.
Yeah, and your trust is probably broken down for anyone in the future as well.
Massively. Huge trust issue. I look at people in a very, very different way now. Not from a cynical way, but at least for now, I look at people from the perspective of, are you trying to fuck me over here? And I never used to be like that. Really, really was trusting. And I definitely think that I'm glad that it's happened at a younger age than, say, when I'm 45, 50. And I say that because then you've got much less of your life left.
Right.
And also you've got even more responsibilities.
Yeah, you've got less on the line now than you would potentially, at least anyway, in the future.
100%. And I think there's a big learning curve in terms of how I am doing the business as well. in terms of, actually, I don't want a large pot of money, because one, that invokes a hell of a lot of investor scrutiny. Two, what if I waste it? If you've got a smaller pot and, you know, you're just looking to grow, it means you're going to spend every penny a lot better. Like, we've just kicked off doing ads. And I guess this is a blessing and a curse, but we've built our user base purely organically. Because what you, and now moving into ads, sorry, is that it's a completely different world. But you reach almost like a natural capacity when it's organic, because you're picking up users maybe at the awareness stage that won't necessarily convert into a customer. Whereas if you target ads specifically and retarget, you can really get specific as to who you want. Like, you can take who your current buyers are, put them into like a like for like style thing on Meta, and then just target the exact same type. So it's really interesting delving into that world and looking at return on ad spend, cost per click, all of that. And I think a lot of people tend to shy away from it for some reason, because they feel like there's not going to be a return. But for me, it's just basically like passive investing. You just putting your money back in to tell more people about what you're doing. And that is what makes sense to me, because I don't want to have to be on Twitter or whatever talking constantly about, you know, the business. I want to be talking about the economy. I want to be talking about the markets, which I do as well, but I'd rather leave it up to an automated process where I know exactly, if I spend $1,000, I'm going to get $4,000 out of it. Do you know what I mean? And I think some people shy away from it, and especially because I feel like it's in the media realm anyway, all they talk about on podcasts is organic growth. Whereas if you look at someone like Morning Brew's audience growth, it's actually 75%, I think, is ad spend.
Is it really?
They never talk about that.
That's an unbelievable business, by the way.
It's a fantastic business. They've really done well. I think since they were acquired by Axel Springer said to them, you need to do video. So you see their quality of video now, and they're everywhere on Instagram. I had very, very strong doubts about it before their video sort of push for video, because I looked at their webpage and it looked like any standard online publications sort of site. You know, it was just like boxes of just stories. Now you look at their video content and contrast it, it's very much user focused. Like, they're having a conversation with you. So they've done really, really well. And I think they've caught onto the video trend massively.
How have you've successfully built social media profiles, haven't you? Across multiple different social media channels. How have you done that?
Marmite.
Oh yeah, really?
Absolutely. So I actively go out to, not to be controversial, but to definitely be divisive on certain topics. Purely because, one, it helps you find your tribe, but two, the people that disagree, people love to show negativity more than they love to show support. So if you are getting interactions based on negativity, especially replies and comments, it just drives the algo. So it's literally just a way to get the people that do like you to see your stuff.
Yeah.
It's just playing the algo off as what it's intended for.
I actually saw something from you. I'm not too sure if it was a tweet or a TikTok post or whatever it was, but you said something like, if I can deliberately put a mistake into a post because more people will comment on it.
Yeah.
Trying to correct you.
Yeah.
And then that will just feed the algorithm.
Yeah.
Or was that just playing into that algorithm?
Yeah. You have to think about these things out of the box, especially if you're not maybe spending money to the extent that some other brands do, because they're not going to do these things because they're already too big and they've got shareholders to worry about. Whereas if you're small and you're a one-man band, or like you've got a couple of people, you can do these kind of guerrilla marketing tactics, I guess. But it's literally the only one that I have trouble with is Instagram. And I'm not too sure why. But TikTok grew that from 0 to 13,000+ in, I think, when did I start TikTok? 11 months. So the growth slowed recently. But if I were to put out one of my content pillars, I could probably get 500,000 views quite easily.
Wow.
And that's which UK company is going to fail. Again, reaching back into that negativity, it gets over 500,000 views every single time. Twitter, very easy to grow. LinkedIn, very easy to grow. It's just about how you structure things. You've got to take it from a reader's perspective? Do they want to read a big block paragraph, or do they want to take each line one by one and make it very simple as to what you're talking about? As well, if you refine your message on a complex topic, use similes, use a bit of storytelling. That's pretty much the key. But the divisive element is definitely one that works over and over.
Really?
Yeah.
And that's something which maybe I might battle with, because working for a professional organization and trying to have like a professional sounding and looking podcast, being a bit more divisive, I'm like, is that on brand? But it depends on what you're after, I guess. Are you after growth? Are you after going viral? Or is there something else that motivates you?
The thing that corporations forget and companies forget is that their audience isn't what their company stands for. Their audience is the audience. It's what the individual thinks. There's not a collective of people. Some clients are really... The thing is that they try to appease everyone. And you can't appease everyone.
And they try and be polished.
Yeah. You can't appease everyone, because if I were to say the sky's blue, there's someone that's going to come across and say, well, actually, sometimes, you know, you can't actually see the blue sky. So you could argue that it's white or grey at certain points. It's like, thank you for that. You can now go away. Do you know what I mean? So you've only got to focus on the people that are like your previous customers, because otherwise you're just battling the tide, in my view. That's definitely something that I've learned. I've learned not to care about people that don't really like me, because they're not who's going to actually put any money in my bank account.
Yeah, so such a good point. What is your target audience?
I would say Henrys, so high earners not rich yet. It's a very well-known phrase, I think, these days, because they're the ones that are motivated enough to deploy their money. Interestingly, we've noticed of late that we've just released a cohort which has done very, very well. It's a year-long cohort. We priced it at $2,000. So it's an hour and a half of a video a week where we just sit down, and 35 people signed up for it. So we had a very good month in August. And what we've noticed is that it actually spans so many different, I guess, occupations, ages, that kind of thing. But the one commonality is that people have an insecurity about investing. They really, really feel like they need their hand held. And I always wonder why people go to IFAs, you know, or investment managers like yourself, when really all they could do is be long the S&P and be all right. But they don't trust themselves enough to do that. Yeah. They don't trust that that's the right thing.
And holding on to it when it falls 20%.
Exactly. And people would like to, I think, remove accountability. And accountability removal is a very, very interesting, I guess, sales technique / reason to buy or get a client in. And if you can find people that want the accountability removed, either because they're too busy to do it themselves, either because they don't trust themselves enough, I think as well, especially in our remit, women are of that cohort, because one of the girls actually in the cohort is a CLO fund manager. And she doesn't trust herself enough to understand enough about everything else. And I said to her, I said, you do realise that you really probably do understand way more than you think. And one of her picks the other day, because I asked people to pick a stock, was Broadcom.
Wow.
Which was fantastic. Because we basically look at things from a momentum perspective. And so the strategy's there. It's very well set. I think it's very difficult to lose money in stocks unless you're going for sub 2 billion market cap stuff. And her pick was Broadcom, and it made perfect sense because it fits so many discretionary criteria. And I was like to her, look, you can do this. It's a great pick. But I think it's a very interesting one with the female cohort, because traditionally they don't like to take as much risk. But there's also another lady called Karen in the cohort / think. She's 54, I think, or 55. Works in the public sector up in Newcastle. Her crypto portfolio, I think, at the peak was like $500,000. Like, she opened up an account with a broker that I'm loosely connected with, and her portfolio was then made up of Rolls Royce, S&P, Greggs, great stock, great stock.
Yeah, no one's not buying sausage rolls.
yeah. Marks and Spencer.
Yeah.
And these are all things that I've, what's the right words? Mentioned
Mm-hmm.
are great companies. Didn't mention to buy them. But she's not your typical risk taker,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense. And I think the female cohort is really quite good because, good for me anyway, because they don't trust themselves enough when they really, really should. They make definitely better risk-taking decisions than men because they're not punting about in AIM markets all day. But two, for their perspective, because I feel like they really can do a good job. They just don't have the confidence. And I don't know if it's confidence or if it's biological or whatever, but there's some great business to be done with women out there through different marketing tactics, I feel. For you and I, that is.
Yeah.
You know, because everyone likes accountability removed, but I think that women aren't catered to enough.
Yeah, there's one of the guests that was on the podcast is a female financial advisor, and I think 17% of the IFA market is female.
Mm-hmm.
But there's an ever-growing amount of wealth coming from women who are independently making money, a lot of money, and she's trying to cater to that through a platform called Female Invest, if you've come across that before. So essentially a network that was created out of Sweden, I think it was, or Denmark, and they're trying to essentially improve the knowledge and the confidence of women who want to invest themselves, and also find a suitable advisor, because a lot of women who are maybe independent, successful, they don't want to go to a male financial advisor.
I do know of someone who caters towards OnlyFans creators because they've made so much money, and they have issues, firstly with bank accounts,
Yeah.
but secondly they don't necessarily have a clue as to what to do.
Yeah. Okay.
Fantastic market.
The data that came out of OnlyFans
Ridiculous.
from their annual report the other day was mental.
5.6 billion paid to creators.
Yeah.
It's a very murky market, and I don't like, where it is. I think that it's obviously a fantastic business if you were to just look at the numbers, but in terms of what it's doing, not great. My missus was one of the traditional glamour models, if you like, and she was like, I think it's disgusting because with, when the lads mags and stuff like that were out, it was a cut-off, whereas now it's any girl thinks that they can become, a multi-millionaire just by doing whatever, and the problem is that it gets more and more depraved based on what people want, and there's that addiction to the money. So it's a great business. I think it's very degrading for society, though, unfortunately.
Yeah, there's probably definitely a moral or ethical barrier sort of you have to jump over. Also, that do you want things like your kids or whatever to be able to see that in the future, and
also
like
only a very, very small proportion make a massive amount of money.
That's the same with all creators. Yeah. There's a lot of people on YouTube or OnlyFans or whatever. It's a really, really small amount make up the majority of the revenue,
which is fine, Pareto principle and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if you're doing YouTube, there's not as much personal risk, maybe. But with OnlyFans, I feel like it's just, look, with technology, I feel like the barriers to entry of everything, it allows liquidity of information, right? And the everyone's got an iPhone. It's a fantastic tool, and the cost of the iPhone is so democratizing that you can I do most of my work on an iPhone, or I could at least, but then there's also trade-offs, as with anything, and I think we always have to remember that.
That's actually a really good question, a really good point, and a good question I think that comes out of it. You're someone who is active on social media. How do you keep your life private? Do you care about privacy?
Keep my daughter off
socials.
100%. I'm pretty open though. Like, I feel like the amount of times that people have come to me in DMs or whatever and said thanks for saying that, or things like this is quite large. I mean, even with regards to the testosterone thing.
Yeah, sure.
Most people don't really like to admit it. I'm like, I don't give a fuck. Like, why not? Like, And someone just the other week got his tested and it was low. And he's been struggling trying to understand why he's been like this for literally years now. And he's like, thank you so much, which I think is quite good. There was another guy that I didn't know about that said that he got a job at an investment bank, and it was because of us, as in Think / Macrodisiac. And then when he was looking through certain names, he joined a job at Morgan Stanley. When he was looking at certain names, he realised one of the names that was on the intranet at Morgan Stanley. He was like, why do I know that name? And then a day or two later, he was looking at our chat, our Discord, and he realised it was from him. And so 2 people from our Discord got into Morgan Stanley on internships, and now they've got full-time jobs there.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So
that's actually another thing. The whole podcast is probably aimed at 16 to 35-year-olds that maybe, well, obviously ambitious, but some people might want a bit of direction about where do they want to go, or assistance, listening to people like you, for example, and your story and your career, and maybe also how Think can help people get into like the job of their dreams. Like if you want to go to work for a Goldman Sachs or a Morgan Stanley, this might be a platform for them to join a community where they're going to learn and probably get a leg up in an interview instead.
Yeah, I think the main way that we've benefited people is through trade ideas, and really thinking about markets from a perspective of a non-analyst. A lot of what you see that's out there is from an analyst perspective. So let's say, for example, German data comes out bad. Okay. Well, German data is bad. Why is the DAX at all-time highs? Like an analyst might say, well, you have to sell the DAX here. And it's like, well, a trader would say 75% of the DAX sales is in USD, US growth strong. And so that means that people are still going to be buying from German companies. Economically, it's not good for Germany, of course, but we're traders. We don't care necessarily about the German economy in that way. And so I think from that perspective, it takes definitely a different take on how the market should be viewed. And, there's trade ideas coming out all the time. Ideas, not buy and sell recommendations. And so I think, let's say you're going for an interview or something like that. And they're saying, give me your best trade idea on fixed income right now. And then you come out with something that is from a very, very well-studied trader's perspective. Whether it's right or wrong, they can see that you have got that sort of idea or eye for, okay, this is actually how the market works, rather than data bad, market down, So I think that's it. But we've, helped another guy get into a hedge fund in Sweden.
Wow, really?
Yeah. We're actually launching a recruitment business. Well, we've launched it. So what we're doing, and one of the tricky things right now is we've launched it at a really bad time in the market because the jobs vacancies just necessarily aren't there. But it's good to just launch something and try it out. And the way that we're looking at things is we get subscribers that are obviously subscribing to us because they're really, really interested in the way that we think. We like to think that we have a bit of an edge. And so if we've got subscribers coming in, we feel like that these people are the kind of subscribers or profiles that a company in finance might want because they've got something else about them. And so if we say to people or companies, look, we've got this high quality list, we can monetize that, especially if they're at the higher end of salaries. Charge 20% of the salary for the year. Say they're on 200 grand, that's 40 grand. Amazing. And so we're looking at that as a very sort of high ticket, slow burner. I'm working with a recruitment guy who's been a one-man band for 20 years. And he's got a very nice, process that he works through. Like he's placed an Indian guy over in Gujarat because he understands that India has something like 28 different languages, there's different regions. So he really gets specific as to what the client needs. And that's something that we feel we can sort of marry up, whereas I've got the technical understanding of finance, he's got the process understanding as to what companies want, what candidates would fit. And so we can just bring those together and then create another good business out of it, I think.
What are your ambitions with this business?
3 years ago, it was to get it acquired within 6 to 7 years. Now we're focusing day to day. We've really, really drawn back exactly where we want. You've obviously got like dream ideas of, getting a £50 million exit with 50% equity still in your hands or whatever. But for right now, we're considering that we're a brand new business again, even though effectively we've had the previous business, because we've been forced into the situation basically. So it's back to the drawing board in terms of how we do everything, even in terms of spending on marketing, advertising. We'd never done that before because all of our clients had come through social media, just from what we were saying. Whereas now we needed to be more structured. We need to say, okay, investor, if there were to be one that comes along, you give us 50K, we spend 30K of it on ads. We know that we're going to convert X%, which will lead to XY revenue. You can't do that organically, unfortunately. It's just not the same because there's clearly no money spend going in. It's reliant on your efforts and whatever discretionary process to an extent that you're using already. So now we just want to make it all systemized. We just want to say, all right, yeah, we're going to chuck $5,000 at ads this month and we're going to get 15 grand out or 20 grand out.
And then you can then show an investor the results one day.
Exactly. And then they can say, all right, well, I want to give you £100 million then. Hopefully.
What is your personal motivation for starting the business? And I think you alluded to something earlier on about a bit of like a lifestyle business. But then you just said there about you wanted to maybe exit in 6 to 7 years. What's your motivation for running a business? Is it something deeper? Is it family? Do you want to be rich?
It's a good question. I personally think that it's because for some reason, I seem to rebel a little bit internally. Like even at TradingView, I love TradingView to bits. They've done me so well. When I didn't like something, like, I'd be like, well, why am I doing this? Like, I don't need to do this. Do you know what I mean? Or I'd maybe skip something that I didn't think was necessary to do, almost like I was trying to run my own business anyway. And I always felt like, or at least feel like, there's a cap where you have to go begging to someone else for a promotion or something like that, which is fine and it gives you fantastic stability, but I feel like I'm a bit mental. So I need that pressure. I need that edge. I work really, really well under pressure. And I don't really succumb to pressure very easily. And so I feel like when you're running your own business, there's so many moving parts that you're constantly under pressure.
Is that how you stay motivated then, running your own business?
I guess so. I guess as well, it comes down to like solving a problem rather than going through the mill every day. I've made many mistakes with it though, like loads of mistakes, like, even the basics like accounting and things like that. Just, I feel like everyone does it. But these are just things that you go through and you learn, and sometimes you get a hit. But at the end of the day, probably in a year's time, 2 years, 5 years, do these things matter? No, because you're probably going to be somewhere else and probably doing better. So for me, I feel like it's a bit of a challenge, and I really enjoy writing about stuff and doing videos on stuff and chatting with people. I think that's one of the key things. Really, really enjoy the social element anyway of media. Getting on to do GB News, I love that. It's great. I feel like it's enjoyable for me. Whereas I think a lot of people, they shy away from speaking, from doing things like that, even from doing podcasts like this.
Yeah. Is that something, like I said earlier on in the podcast, that I came across you years ago, probably talking now 6 years ago, it might have been. So you'd have been in your mid-20s at this point. Have you always wanted to, like, this is before personal brand was cool, right? So have you always wanted to be someone who goes out there and speaks and gets your name out there?
No, I don't think so. Do you know what? I think it really came about with Tip TV, as I mentioned, because I originally went there to do some, I think it was just to help out with some social media stuff and just to see how, because they were based in a hedge fund as well, or a hedge fund incubator. So it was also to be around the buy side a bit more when I was, 20, how old was I? 23, 24 maybe, something like that. And so I feel like then my first video was on the US student loans issue. And I was a twat then with that, because I was like, yeah, it's going to blow the US up, all of this like doomer nonsense. And obviously it's not. And I think I spoke about Nelnet, which is a student loan provider. That was the first video I did that was like filmed properly. And I realized after that that actually doing that wasn't so scary. It was just a chat. Even going on GB News and talking with Eamon Holmes, like,
Wow.
that was, again, just a chat. And you realize that all you're doing is talking to people. It's just there's a camera.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't change anything.
And the second time is way, like, exponentially easier than the first time.
Yeah.
The first time feels a bit scary when you're in a new set, or when you're in this sort of setup. You've got a camera in front of you. But have you noticed the camera much? Your own one? Much since you've been talking today?
No.
No, not at all.
No, you don't. Like, you just don't even notice.
Sometimes you just like, you knock it. Like, it's like you forget it's there.
Like, but it is literally just a chat. And I think one of the things to remember as well is that this day and age, I think no matter what you're doing, putting yourself out there is number one, because there's going to be one person at least that watches and likes you. Even from my TikTok, a guy who runs a risk mitigation company, which is basically like PR, also security, crisis management, things like that. He's contacted me on TikTok just yesterday, I think, saying, really like your analysis of things. Let's meet for a coffee next week. Don't know where it will go, but without doing that TikTok, wouldn't have had an opportunity. So putting yourself out there opens up opportunities to people that see something in you, that like you. Another thing as well is a guy that I interviewed with 10 years ago at a market maker. Was it 10 years ago? It might have been, maybe not that long, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, actually. Not that it matters, but a long time ago anyway. He's the chairman of the company. He's just contacted me for a meeting tomorrow. I don't know what it's about, but probably without seeing a LinkedIn post, he wouldn't have reached out to me again. And he remembered that he interviewed me, even though back then I was young, and I guess, I didn't actually get the job in the end, but I was young, and he still remembers me today. So
yeah. And then continued to watch what you're doing, your development.
Yeah. So I think being consistent with a message, having something central to your belief of the world. So for me, it's Georgism. That is like my central, not a religion, because I understand its downfalls and pitfalls as well. Whereas I think religion or religious people, they tend to just think that's absolute and there's no trade-offs. But having something central that you deem as a solution to the world in this day and age, when everyone's talking about negativity with no solution, you can be negative, but as long as you have a solution alongside that, have something to propose, rather than just say, oh, the bloody Tories or bloody Labour. Do you know what I mean? Have something else to put about that you're saying, yeah, fucking Tories, fucking Labour. This is maybe how we could do things instead.
Yeah, that's what frustrated me about the election this year, is that Labour essentially just stay quiet throughout the entire thing. It's always, we're not going to be the Tories, and just essentially finger pointing, where it's like, yeah, but what are you going to do? What's your solution? And now they've come into power. I think they probably blatantly, they kept it obviously quite vague, so they've got a greater degree of flexibility when they come in to be able to increase taxes or whatever they want to do. But yeah, there was no real message. Like, no one really knew what Keir Starmer's like core philosophies were about running the country. It was just that we're not going to be the Tories. Yeah,
and I think, but we've almost like seen in the first 3 months what they call messages.
It's negativity.
It's negativity, but it's from the extent of they don't really understand the economy. I think, as we've already mentioned about the government debt to GDP figure, it's rather a misnomer, because the Bank of England owns a relatively large amount of it. The deficit spend, France spends more. France has a larger deficit to spend. Are they doing badly? Meh, don't really think so. The US has a larger deficit spend at 6.6% of GDP. Japan obviously is in a complete mess. Italy, another mess. But people here wouldn't necessarily consider that. The UK's at 4.4% isn't that bad. And the issue that I see is, if they were to grow the growth denominator there, it he would reduce that deficit spend, right? Because obviously the denominator is increasing as a percent of GDP relative to the spend. So what do they actually care about? Well, they seem to be caring about OBR, which came about under George Osborne's reign, who was a Tory. They're caring about the fact that it's an austere policy, and that austerity was actually from the Stability and Growth Pact, the excessive deficit procedure, which, by the way, the EC is putting France through right now because France has to try and propose a better budget to the EC so that they're not put into the prohibitive procedure. And it's really, really bizarre to me, considering that people have been rallying against the Tories but pro-EU for the last 14 years, when we're going back into austerity now. So there's so much hypocrisy and so much tribalism that one thing that one side does, but then if the other side does it, it's okay. It keeps happening, and it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, the tribalism part is massive, and I think that I've got a couple of conflicting views on this. I think that in America, for example, everyone wears their political badge like it's I have to agree to every policy, and there's no nothing in between. But in the UK, I think that we went through a generation, like our parents' generation, where people just didn't really give a fuck about politics enough to really have a stance. Like, how many? I don't know. Do your parents, for example, do they vote? Do they have a strong opinion?
Do you know what? I don't actually know who my parents vote for.
Yeah.
I'm sure there are people's parents who are very staunchly one or the other.
Yeah.
Especially in London. I feel like it's very much a London thing. They talk about the red wall and stuff, but even that seems quite flimsy.
Yeah, well, we saw that with Brexit, didn't we?
Well, I think this is the thing, is that people are more concerned about specific issues.
Issues now, yeah.
Like Brexit, for example. Immigration is another one, which certainly is an issue, and I don't think it should be shied away from to the extent that people actually really, really want it to be shied away from. I think immigration's good if you have people with actual skills coming in, not just anyone.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, people are very much issue-based. The funny thing about America, though, is that whenever they propose a bill, so they might say that it's like the Inflation Reduction Act, for example. But what happens in America is they also sneak other clauses in. So they'll call it one thing, but then when it's voted on, people will say, oh, yeah, they've passed the Inflation Reduction Act, but they'll have things that are totally unrelated to the Inflation Reduction Act also in there. So they do it very, very sneakily.
Interesting.
It's a really, really nice way of running politics, and also the gerrymandering they have over there.
So it's like a headline layer. This is Inflation Reduction Act, but actually what they've done is they've just put loads of other issues in.
Exactly.
Got it passed through.
Exactly.
All people know about is inflation reduction. They don't understand about all the other things that are in there because they've not looked at it.
So smart.
Interesting.
They are so smart. And it could be to do with like lobbying, like an oil firm lobbying for new fracking open up, which I think is great, for example. But, you know, at the end of the day, they are sneaking things in. Now, that might happen here, but I don't really think that I've heard of it here. But yeah, I think they're very, very sneaky. But in the UK, it seems to be a single issue thing. Yeah. NHS is another one, which tends to be obviously very Labour dominated. But I don't know. There's things that need to be changed, but people are stuck in a very tribal mentality. Things are very, very fixed here. And I don't really understand why.
You said that you're going to move to Portugal. Do you wish you could stay in the UK?
Yeah, desperately. I love the UK. I just think that since the pandemic especially, it's just turned to a bit of a shithole. Do you know what the one real big... There's two big problems for me, and it's what I see on public transport. Go onto public transport, we've mentioned it already, people playing music on their phones, you know, in quiet areas, people just not caring about anyone else. And that might seem trivial, but it's that social degradation. I don't remember that happening 10 years ago. There might have been kids on the back of the bus, but they're just kids being kids. Now I see grown adults just literally sitting there playing something out loud or having phone calls on speakerphone, and it doesn't make sense. But the other thing that's really, really bad and very sad is the amount of vagrancy and mental illness that I see around train stations or just generally.
I live literally above Finsbury Park Station, and the number of people is growing on a weekly basis.
And I feel really bad for them But one, if they've come to the country, they shouldn't be homeless because clearly they don't have the means to have actually come into the country. And number two, if they do have mental illnesses, they need to be helped. We need to have institutions that are actually helping these people. You can't just leave them out there because they might be drug addicted, you know, at the end of the day. So help them. Like, find a way to help these people rather than have them living, committing petty crime, you know, begging and things like that. It's crazy. And it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. And to finalise this podcast, it's called Ambitious Minds. For the UK in particular, what is your ambition for the UK?
So there's, and I'll talk about practical things.
Exactly, yeah.
There's the one that I mentioned with regards to Georgism, you know, let's extract capital, aka debt, that's locked in the land to reduce or increase, affordability of housing. That will reduce the requirement for welfare. It will increase the amount that people can invest, and it will also, you know, basically just improve lives generally. At the same time, obviously, bringing down taxes on capital and income. The second thing is really to look at our pension system. We've got NHS pensions, teachers' pensions. We've got police pensions and firefighter pensions, which are uninvested in equities. You know, a lot of pensions are in the gilt market and things like that. What we need to do is unlock money from these pensions. As you said before, it's the 6th or 7th biggest employer, the NHS, and get them invested in higher risk stuff, which will grow our companies and get us like the US. The Ontario Teachers Fund is 108% funded. They invested in FTX, the crypto exchange. That's how degenerate they are. But their pensions liabilities now aren't just coming from the taxpayer. They're coming from actual returns, from putting the money to good use. I don't know why this isn't a bigger issue in the UK. We've just hit the lowest percentage of domestic pensions invested in UK equities ever.
I know, yeah, it's been declining for a long time.
Ever. And I don't know why. It makes zero sense.
Because our one does this and then the US does this.
But this is the thing, is that it does that because all of this money isn't invested in it.
Exactly.
So it's like, come on, guys. And I think, you know, letting ARM go,
mental.
Crazy.
I've mentioned this statistic before, but the FTSE 100 is the only stock market in the world with less technology companies today than 15 years ago.
That's just disgusting. You know, there's a guy, Neil Shah, who's actually pushing for that at the LSE. But my issue today, and I commented on this with regards to the Peel Hunt paper that came out. It wasn't Peel Hunt. It was the CEO, ex-CEO of Legal & General. And he basically released a paper talking about capital in the UK over the next 100 years. And I was like, fine, but, you know, you were the CEO of one of the biggest pension funds in the UK. Why didn't you do anything about this while you were CEO? And this is the thing, is that people like to talk about stuff after the fact, like rather than actually do things there and then. Don't know why. Maybe
I think it goes back to that risk-taking element.
Yeah. We've got to have a better risk-taking culture.
Yeah.
And less penalisation for taking risk from both a cultural perspective and also from a policy perspective, I think.
Yeah. Rory Sutherland summarises it really well, and he says no one ever got fired for hiring McKinsey. And it's just, if you just do the safe option all the time, then you won't get fired. And I think that's where a lot of people sit.
Yeah.
Not taking risks, safe option. And yeah, it's ultimately led to where we are today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great summarisation.
Yeah. Mate, it's been a pleasure to have you on today.
Yeah, it was a good chat. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, me too. Where can people find you if they want to check you out on socials?
So socials, thinkmoney_. Website is think.money. People always ask if there's a .com at the end, but no, it's just think.money. Great domain. I like it.
Is that so? I know I bought the domain for Ambitious Minds, but there are a number of different iterations of the .com or .co.uk. Is that one of them now? .money?
Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant.
It's great, isn't it? So yeah, I've got that. And my email address is david@think.money as well. So again, a lot of when I put my email in, it says it does not recognise a valid email. I'm like, for God's sake! But yeah, it's a great domain, I think.
Awesome. And do you mind if people reach out to you?
No, please do. More the merrier. On TikTok as well, it's think.talk.
Think.talk.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, look, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on.
Thank you,
and
mate.
yeah, continue doing what you're doing. And I really appreciate your content. I've been following you for a very long time. So actually, when I DM'd you, it was after like years of sort of being a voyeur, I guess, like looking from the outside.
You nonce.
Yeah, just like years of watching and then just like looking at your comment, you looking at
that's
your
appreciated.
stuff, and I really resonate with a lot of it. And actually, I guess we'll finish by saying, you've mentioned this term Georgism for a long time. I understand what that is because I work in the financial world. I've got an interest in like Austrian economics and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But Google it, or maybe check out some of your videos. I'm sure that you've done something on Georgism.
I have. It's a difficult one to explain.
Yeah.
I'm gonna really, really formalize it and get there one day because I think it's really necessary in today's age.
100%. Thank you.
Thank you, mate.